What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Morgan, we are getting ready to be in the heart of draft season. Next week, the NFL kicks off their NFL Draft Combine, which has become a much bigger spectacle than it's ever been. More and more people are watching it every year. It's becoming just like a thing. I think there's now starting to allow fans to actually attend the combine. So the NFL is doing everything they possibly can to hype up this event. And for you and I, two people that obviously are making content for the Lions, making content about this team, one of the most difficult things to do is to stay locked in with draft prospects, because especially with the Lions winning so many games this year, we don't have a lot of opportunities to look back at the draft or to look at some of these college prospects. But the combine, I think, is a perfect opportunity for a lot of people to almost be like a starting point of like, okay, start getting familiar with names, start getting familiar with guys that are rising, falling, whatever the case may be. Because I think from this point on, or at least talking about next week, from that point on, the draft starts to feel much more realistic in terms of where guys are going to be slotted. Obviously, pro days follow after that. That can adjust things a little bit. But like I said, this is the heart of draft season at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as timing goes, man, like both as a Lions fan and someone who like makes content and writes about the team now, I'm thankful that this process starts as late as it does, because I don't miss the days where it started before Thanksgiving, man. I'm not into, you know what I mean? I like winning football games. So, but I do feel like both you and I have made like a pretty big, like good commitment to like dive more into the process this year. This time around, I'm helping write some of the series with Eric's, combine preview series. And then after, the post combine series. So definitely check that out, prideofdetroit.com. But yeah, leave it to the NFL, man, to take something as like, simple as the combine and turn it into a 4-day event now. So
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. But it's the NFL. They're like, oh, we can make more money out of this. We're going to go ahead and do that.
And I mean, I don't know, maybe one of these years we might have to like talk to the people at SB Nation, be like, hey, can you guys hook up a couple of us to go down and just, watch? Because I think it'd be kind of cool to see some of these things in person. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today in this video, is really just what to watch for when it comes down to the NFL Combine, because there's so much that's put on TV that honestly, Morgan, in my opinion, doesn't really add a lot of substance when it comes down to evaluating these prospects, or at least not every prospect, right? We know that the 40-yard dash is like honestly like the spectacle for the combine, but yet a 40-yard dash doesn't apply to every single position group. And even then, even within a 40-yard dash for certain position groups, there's only like a small part of it that really matter, right? If you're talking offensive lineman or defensive lineman, it's like that 10-yard split that really matters out of a 40-yard dash.
Yeah, I know everyone loves the 40-yard dash because it is a spectacle and, there's records to be broken and this and that. But so much of it is that like the movement drills, man. That's what I like when you hear scouts talk about players and they're like, he has like rare or like elite traits when it comes to movement skills, because they're out there, no pads. It's a lot easier to move if you played football. No pads, you feel light as a feather, flowy, you know what I mean? But you put them pads on, it's a little bit different. So yeah, they turned it into a 4-day spectacle like we talked about. Jeremy is going to be there. I think it's his first time. I'm pretty sure it is, actually, now that I think about it. So excited for him to be there. I'm sure that's going to add to the website's coverage, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Thursday, so next Thursday, February 27th, defensive linemen and linebackers starting at 3 p.m. All on NFL Network, by the way. We can throw the link in the description too for the schedule. Defensive backs and tight ends the next day, Friday, February 20th, also at 3 p.m. Following that, Saturday, March 1st, got a little trio: quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs. So if you're looking for speed and all the flash, maybe tune in that day. And then to cap it off, Sunday, March 2nd, offensive linemen. So you get the big boys. I'm excited about that because there's a lot. It's a deep draft. I'm still early on in my process. Shout out to Eric, that board that he creates. Definitely
Man.
check out his Patreon if you guys are draft people or if you're aspiring to be, more knowledgeable come April. We'll throw that in the description too, man. That thing is in like Jeremy tweeted something the other day, like that board alone is worth the subscription like 10 times over, right, Miko?
It really is. If you're trying to stay up to date with like, again, not just like who's like the hot name in like the first round, but like again, being able to see, where some of these prospects are being slotted in terms of like some of the later rounds. just become familiar with names and understanding just like again how they performed at the combine. What are they, what are they doing at their pro days? Where are they falling on draft boards? All of that information. Like Eric does such a great job of keeping that kind of organized for everyone. And he gives out, I think it's like every month or every couple weeks, it's an update. So
It
again, he
updates
puts a
quickly.
lot of work into it.
Yeah, man, that's his baby. So we got the pre combine update now. So again, we'll throw that in the link too. Definitely check that out if you're looking to just learn a little bit more and follow along. Like we're going to make content about this whole thing, and that Excel file like makes it way easier for sure. So
Absolutely. And speaking of like again, one of the reasons that Eric's Excel sheet is so good is that it also keeps in mind like what he at least believes that the Lions needs are going into not just like the draft, but also going into free agency. And so with that in mind, Morgan, what are some specific position groups that you're going to be focused on that actually apply to the Detroit Lions?
So, like, if you're looking for like someone who's going to help the Lions in 2025, right? We've already talked about how we as a fan base might need to recalibrate the expectations for draft classes because of where the roster is. You know what I mean? And as far as needs go, right, people are going to point to the defensive line, whether you think that's a three technique, like a defensive tackle that can kick out to end, or an edge rusher opposite of Hutchinson. You know, obviously we have free agency before the draft, so keep that in mind. But that's kind of where I think I'm going to default to. So if you really want to lock in on like something, in my opinion, two position groups that will be in play for the Lions like early, come April, I do think it'll be, the defensive line and then the offensive line. So, and look at tackles too. I know you think about it, you have Panay Sewell and then Taylor Decker, and then you used a pick last year on Giovanni Manu. You have Colby Sorsdal, who we're seeing where that's going to end up. But if you draft, if you technically draft a tackle at some point that has the flexibility to kick in a guard, well, then shoot, that could be their eventual replacement for Kevin Zeitler if he's brought back. You know what I mean, in 2025. So that's kind of how you have to start thinking about the roster, just because it's not 2022 anymore, and there aren't like four or five obvious positions that are just like, yep, whoever's the best, you're going to go out there and you're going to you're going to start.
Yeah.
So I do think that's a big weight. Like we have to adjust how we're thinking about it, right, Miko?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think a couple groups that like I'm going to be specifically focusing on are actually on the offensive side of the football. And I know, like you're saying, a lot of people are immediately going to default to the defensive line, and of course they need some help there. But when you look at the offensive line, like you were saying, the Lions do have needs at guard, right? They were able to draft Christian Mahogany and, like you said, Giovanni Manu last year. So you have one player that at least, in Mahogany that looks like he could be an eventual starter for this team on the interior of the offensive line, and Giovanni Manu, who is at least a project that, again, if he develops quickly enough and he develops well enough, maybe you're talking about him playing left or right tackle on this Lions offensive line. But also when you start to talk about wide receiver, I did a video yesterday. Well, if you're watching this video now, it was yesterday, talking about Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. And one of the reasons I did that draft profile is because the Lions do have like a low key need at wide receiver. And so keeping an eye on that group as well, just seeing all the different types of wide receivers that are going to be available in this draft class is a really good thing to kind of focus on. And the one thing that I really love about the offensive players, being able to watch them specifically do the on-field drills, is that I think it's easier to spot deficiencies when we're talking about technique. So if a wide receiver isn't good at coming out of breaks, if he's not good at doing it without pads, you can almost kind of bet that he's not great at doing it when he's in pads. If an offensive lineman isn't great at pass setting when he doesn't really have a rush, or if he's not really balanced well, you can almost just assume that when he's going up against a player, opposite him, he's probably going to struggle in that regard too. So offensive line, wide receivers are two position groups that I'm definitely going to be focused on as well.
Yeah, no doubt, Miko, because you look at receivers and people are going to be like, oh, they're loaded there, but at the same time, as of right now, past beyond 2026, I think it's just Amon Ra that's signed through 2026. I think Khalif might be. I'd have to check over the cap. So, but JMO going into his fourth year of his rookie deal with the team option being 2026. So we'll see how that plays out. I think that's going to end up getting picked up just because he's shown enough, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day. But yeah, I do think receiver and offensive line all on the table. At the end of the day, Brad Holmes has shown us he's going to pick the best, what he has the highest on his board, right? And he wants that's his goal too. He doesn't want to enter the draft with any obvious like needs, in my opinion. So
Hmm.
he wants to be able to set himself up. And I'm with you. It sounds like very obvious when people say this, but I'm a fan of drafting just premium athletes and having the coaching staff help them figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that the Lions have done relatively well. And I think, again, some people are going to point back to the last draft class and be like, well, it was only Terrion Arnold that kind of made a splash. But I think people fail to realize that injury was a reason that we didn't get to see some of the other guys, right? Ennis Rakestraw Jr. was someone that was kind of coming out of camp, was slotted as someone that was going to see the field a good amount. And then he struggled with injuries that entire season. You look at Christian Mahogany, dealt with an injury early on or dealt with a sickness that kind of kept him out and kept him a little behind the eight ball. But once he was healthy and once the Lions were able to get him worked in because they were dealing with other injuries on the offensive line, he looked like he belonged. Siani Vaki made some plays on special teams. You and I talked about this last year, right? The Lions roster is at a point where not every draft pick that gets, picked by the Lions is guaranteed to have an impact level like performance on this team going into the season. Maybe your first pick, and obviously you're hoping your first two picks are able to do that, but you just never know depending on what they decide to prioritize. Because again, we could spitball here, but if they decide to go offensive line, that could still just be depth. They go wide receiver, that's still possibly you're talking about a wide receiver three because Amon Ra and Saint or Amon Ra and Jamo are going to take so many of those snaps. So there's a level of just being flexible in the draft process at this point that I think fans definitely need to have.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like even Vaki, right? Like a good like outlook for Vaki this year would be competing for running back three snaps. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if Craig Reynolds is brought back or whoever's in the building, right? Like that's what you're looking for Vaki, and then him to continue to be a special teams ace. And it's a testament to where the roster is. Like you said, Miko, I'm right there with you. And it's a good thing, folks. It really is. Like if Rakestraw, I'm right there. Rakestraw was on track. I think it was to start like week 2 or 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then he popped up and it was just soft tissue stuff, and he dealt with it for like most of the year. So hopefully he can be healthy and bounce back, because I expect big things from him. Like if you say they bring back Carlton, right?
Mm-hmm.
Carlton and Terrion are your outside starters, and then I think they'll give Rakestraw the opportunity to like compete with Amik for the nickel. You know what I mean? And that's what this coaching staff is all about. Like, because I think that would be a
Yeah.
battle. Whew, that'd be good.
Yeah, you have two dogs at that position. So I think again, going into this draft season, going into the combine, keeping your perspective fairly open to like, hey, not just looking for guys that are going to be day one starters, but looking for guys that can be quality depth. Because if this last season taught us anything, that's what the Lions need more than anything across the board, right? We can definitely hone in on the defensive line, but they need depth at so many places. And that's what the combine provides you. And that's why, Morgan, I don't think going into the combine, if you're someone that watches the combine, if you're someone that puts value in the combine, because I understand not everyone does, not to get just caught up in the speed drills and the explosiveness drills, like to put a lot of emphasis into what these players are doing on the field. So if we're talking defensive linemen, right? Putting a lot of attention into, okay, how do these players bend? Who seems to have good get off? If you are going to watch the 40, again, paying attention to that 10-yard split, like that matters way more than whether or not that edge player ran a 5-second 40 or not. What did that 10-yard split look like? What do they look like when they're doing the hoop drill? What does it look like when they're doing,
Broad
I
jump.
can't, right, those types of things. I can't remember the one drill that's like, it's one of my favorites where it's like they have to like start on their stomach and then it's like the directionality of like how good are they at switching their hips.
Hmm.
It's the little technical things that you really want to pay attention to, right, Morgan, when it comes down to the combine.
Yeah, and a lot of the times you're having position coaches from different teams putting those players through those drills too. So like, you're like, Kelvin Shepard is going to be there, no doubt. Like, and then I'm trying to think of, Casey Rogers, right? The Lions' new
Mm-hmm.
defensive line coach. You better believe he's going to be up there getting a close look, at the defensive line prospects, because it's a need. I think in terms of like that's a position they could double dip at, in my opinion. Bring
Yeah.
in, spend two pretty premium picks and walk away feeling good about it. Just because I do think that that's a position group that needs a nice little jolt of young talent to balance out a couple vets and some soon to be very expensive players with Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson's likely extension inbound. So yeah, you got to watch. That's my biggest thing. I said it earlier. Listen to when people talk about the movement skills of a player, like how effortlessly, like he's just a mover. Like when you watch Sam Laporta, in my opinion, that's probably when he started turning heads is at the combine, because they're like, oh, this is a 6'3", 250-pound athlete. Like he can
Yeah.
move, he's got some fluid hips. He's bendy at the top of his route. So it's things like that I think people begin to like pay attention to, because at the end of the day, all these guys are going to put up crazy numbers. Some are going to put up some, when Kent Lee Platty's, Raz stuff starts popping up, and,
Yeah.
like Jack Campbell was an elite athlete, even though, white linebacker from Iowa, but he was like eighth of all linebackers ever, put into Raz. So something to keep an eye on, because Brad Holmes has shown, yeah, they want football players. They want high character guys. Like Dan Campbell said, we don't want no turds here. But at the end of the day, they want some premium athletes, because they believe their coaching staff is, and they've shown it. The hits are more than the misses. You know what I mean? In terms of
Yeah.
bringing people along.
And one other thing that I'll say, or at least one last thing I'll say when it comes down to the combine is, if someone pops off, if someone starts turning a lot of heads, allow that to be the thing that facilitates you to start looking at film on that player. Because like Morgan's saying, like there's a lot of these guys that are athletes. A lot of these guys are going to go out there and they're going to run well, they're going to jump well, all of those things. And if you haven't heard this player talked amongst some of the elite, but all of a sudden they turn heads at the combine, do the same thing all of these scouts are going to do the same thing all these GMs are going to do. Start seeing if you can find tape on that player and see if that stuff translated on the field. Because again, a lot of these guys are great athletes, but not all of them are able to translate that athleticism to the field. There's a huge part of the NFL game that's mental, especially when you start talking about positions like safety, when you talk about offensive line. Like, it's awesome that you can jump out the off the gym, right? Like that's great. But can you be able to diagnose like cover two? Can you diagnose when a blitz is coming? Can you do those types of things? And if you start to see on film, like, man, this player looks like a great athlete, but they don't look like they're able to really understand the game. Again, doesn't mean that you take them off your draft board, but then you start to understand, like, okay, maybe that player really is a day 2, day 3 type of prospect.
No doubt, Miko. And you hear a lot of people around the game say things like they're looking for the combine to reaffirm or like reconfirm what they've seen on
Yes.
tape. And then the antithesis of that is Brian Branch being on the Detroit Lions, right? Like Brian
Mm-hmm.
Branch was the 45th overall selection. Should have, obviously, in retrospect, a lot of teams are like, yeah, we messed up. You know what I mean? Like we probably
Mm-hmm.
should have taken this man because he's going to be an all pro like multiple times and he's a dog. But people got a little shied away because he didn't get a certain time on his 40 and this and that. And that's where I think you put the cart before the horse, and
Yes.
you start making decisions that aren't necessarily in line with what you've seen on tape, because some people are workout warriors, you know what I mean? But then
Mm-hmm.
when the pads come on and it gets real, like you talked about, Miko, that kind of separates the workout warriors from the football players.
Absolutely. So with all that said, guys, when it comes down to the combine next week, keep in mind some of the positions that the Lions are really going to be focused on. Like Morgan said, defensive line, offensive line. I think wide receiver is another one that could definitely be up there. And then when it comes down to watching the combine and being able to dissect that information, put a lot of emphasis on the position drills. Make sure that you're using the combine to do what Morgan was just saying. Use that to reaffirm what you've already seen on tape. And if you haven't seen these players on tape, use what they're doing at the combine as an opportunity to go look at some of their film and see if some of the stuff they were doing in t-shirts and shorts is translating to actual in-game action. If you're able to do that, I think you'll be much better prepared for the rest of the draft season, and you'll have a much better idea of understanding where players should be properly slotted and how likely they are to fit into what the Lions want when it comes down to restocking this roster for the future. But with all that said, guys, like Morgan was saying earlier, if you want to stay locked in with any more of the pre-combine conversation or even post-combine information, you got to check out prideofdetroit.com. Eric and so many of the other writers are going to be putting up new articles about specific position groups that are that are going to make it easy for you to understand who stood out and who to kind of keep an eye on, as well as just any more additional information about the Detroit Lions as we go through the rest of the offseason. While we do have the combine, right after the combine, we're going to be talking about free agency. So like everything is going to be moving fairly quickly as we inch even closer to the draft. And then eventually after that, off-season workouts and all of those things. So the website is the perfect place to stay locked in with everything that's going on with this team. You can also hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because that's going to make it easy for you to find any of our video content or any of our live streams that we have when we're, putting out content in that form as well. Well, with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.